My husband left me at the airport for his mistress on our anniversary. Now he's stalking me and threatening to end it all since she dumped him. My name's Olivia, and I'm 33. Everything I'm about to share kicked off a few months before I hit that birthday. My husband, Daniel, is 35. We'd been married for 7 years and had been together for a total of 9. No kids between us, and honestly, looking back now, I'm incredibly thankful for that. It was always just him and me. Things started to shift a couple of years ago. Daniel gradually became more distant. He'd stay late at work more and more often. At first, he blamed it on a major project and looming deadlines. I understood. I've had those stretches at my job too. But eventually, that became his go-to excuse for everything. When he was home, it didn't really feel like he was. Most of the time, he was glued to his phone, either scrolling endlessly or typing. Anytime I asked who he was messaging, he'd brush it off with the just work stuff and get irritated that I'd even asked. We barely talked anymore. We used to chat about everything, our days, silly things, but all of that faded. Trying to talk to him felt like talking to a brick wall. I made a few efforts to bring it up gently. I'd say things like, "Hey, we haven't really connected lately." Or, "You seem off, is everything okay?" His responses were always the same: "Work's just been rough," or "I'm tired." And sometimes, he'd turn it back on me, acting like I was being clingy or inventing problems that weren't there. His moods became unpredictable. Some days he was totally withdrawn, sulking around and barely speaking. Other days, he was on edge, snappy over the smallest things. If I asked for a bit of help around the house, he might bark that he was too busy. If dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it, he'd get annoyed. He made me feel like I was the problem. And if I reacted to his attitude, he'd call me overly sensitive. Whenever I tried to plan something nice for us, like a weekend outing or dinner, he'd either come up with a reason to skip it or agree, only to act disinterested the entire time. Then came Isabel. She was a consultant his company would bring in for big projects. At first, when he mentioned her, it was casual, things like "Isabel suggested this approach," or "She really knows her stuff." But over time, he started bringing her up more and more. He'd go on about how smart she was, how driven she seemed, how she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. I met her once, super briefly, at a company Christmas party a couple of years ago. She was outgoing, charming, and Daniel spent most of the evening talking to her. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't want to come off as the jealous wife. Over the months that followed, Daniel started canceling our plans, sometimes last minute. One night, we were supposed to have dinner with my parents. Just an hour beforehand, he called and said there was a major crisis at work and he had to go in. He sounded genuinely stressed, so I covered for him with my family. Another time, we had concert tickets for a band he claimed to love. That afternoon, he told me he wasn't feeling well and couldn't go. I ended up taking a friend instead. A few days later, I came across a photo on a colleague's social media from a so-called boring work meeting he'd mentioned earlier that week. The picture showed Isabel and Daniel standing way too close, both laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I asked him about it. His whole demeanor changed, cold and defensive. He said it was a work dinner, that Isabel was just a colleague, and I was acting paranoid. He told me I needed to stop inventing stories in my head and slammed the office door behind him, locking himself in there for hours. When he finally came out, it was like nothing had happened. No apology for how angry he got, just a vague "sorry you misunderstood." Around that same time, he started nitpicking everything I did. It began small, like saying my cooking wasn't as good as it used to be, even though he used to rave about it. He'd claim the house was messy when I'd spent the whole day cleaning. Then came the comments about how I dressed, suggesting I should try harder. After we'd hang out with friends, he'd compare me to other women, saying one was so engaging or so funny, clearly implying I wasn't. It stung. And when I told him how much it hurt, he'd act like he was just being honest or trying to help me improve. His temper also got worse. Never directed at me physically, but it was still scary. One night, we were going over some finances, and I brought up a few big purchases he'd made without discussing them with me. He immediately accused me of nagging, stood up, and hurled his dinner plate into the sink so hard it shattered. He just stood there for a second, staring at the mess, then walked out of the kitchen. Another time, we argued about whether to spend the holidays with his family or mine. It got pretty heated, and he stormed off into the garage only to come back later with bloodied knuckles and a hole punched clean through the drywall. He mumbled something about stress and promised he'd patch the wall. He did, eventually. But the memory stuck. Despite all of this, when our 7th anniversary rolled around, Daniel suddenly changed gears. He was cheerful, almost glowing. He told me he was planning something huge, a surprise trip for the two of us. A whole month before, he showed me this fancy travel brochure for Bali. Said he knew things had been rough, that he'd been stressed and distant, but he wanted to fix it. He wanted to reconnect and bring back that spark. And for a while, he really seemed like his old self. He was attentive again, more involved at home, actually started conversations. He bought me a brand new suitcase and even picked out some clothes for the trip. I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, things were going to turn around. We flew to Bali, and the first few days were straight out of a dream. Our villa was gorgeous, private pool, tropical flowers all around. Daniel was warm, affectionate, constantly holding my hand, showering me with compliments. He booked romantic dinners on the beach and took a ton of photos of us. He even posted them on social media with captions like 7 years and still my beautiful bride and making memories in paradise with my one and only. Seeing those posts gave me a rush of relief. I started to believe maybe this really was the beginning of a new chapter for us. The plan was to spend 3 days at this resort, then head to a more secluded island for the last 4. On the morning of day 4, we had breakfast by the pool, packed our bags, and waited for the taxi to the airport. Daniel seemed a bit quieter than usual, but I figured he was just tired from all the travel. Once in the taxi, he barely looked up from his phone. He was typing nonstop, eyes locked on the screen. I asked if everything was okay, and he just gave me a quick nod, never glancing up. I figured it was something work-related that he wanted to wrap up before we hit the remote island. The airport was crowded. We got our luggage out of the taxi and headed toward check-in. Just before we reached the counter, he turned to me and said, "I just need to run to the restroom real quick, I'll meet you at the check-in desk." He had his carry-on and his backpack with him. "Okay," I said. I found the right line for our flight and waited. The line moved fairly fast. I kept glancing around, expecting him to walk up any minute. But he didn't. When I reached the front, the check-in agent asked for both our passports and tickets. I explained that my husband had just stepped away to use the restroom and would be back shortly. I stepped aside to let others go ahead and tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I sent him a quick text, "Where are you?" "I'm at the counter." No reply. I waited 5 more minutes. Then 10. That sinking feeling started creeping in, something wasn't right. I called again. Straight to voicemail. Texted again, "Daniel, our flight's boarding soon. What's going on?" Still nothing. There I was, standing in the middle of the airport with 2 huge suitcases and my carry-on, while people walked past giving me curious glances. I felt completely exposed, like I'd missed some script everyone else was following. I started pacing the immediate area, scanning faces in the crowd, hoping maybe he'd gotten turned around or lost track of time. But there was no sign of him anywhere. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. My heart jumped, I thought it was him finally calling. But it wasn't a call. It was a text from Daniel. The moment I saw his name, something inside me sank. I hadn't even read it yet, but I knew. It was a long message. I'll just share it exactly how he wrote it. "Olivia, I can't do this anymore. I'm not in love with you. I haven't been for a very long time, probably years. I kept trying to make it work, to make myself want this, but I'm done pretending. Isabel is here in Bali. She's the person I've always really wanted to be with. She told me she wants to give us a real shot. A real relationship. She flew in this morning. I'm with her now. I know this is a horrible way to tell you, and I'm sorry for doing this like this, but I couldn't say it to your face. You were always my second choice, Olivia. That's just the truth. My lawyer will be reaching out about the divorce. The flight tickets aren't refundable for you, I checked. But I did leave some cash for you in your top dresser drawer back at the house. Please don't contact me. Daniel." I must have read that message 3, maybe 4 times. Each word felt like a slap. He had planned this. The whole anniversary trip, the romantic gestures, it was all just a setup to lead me here and leave me behind. He brought me all the way to a foreign country under the illusion of repairing our relationship, just so he could ditch me for another woman. One he had secretly arranged to meet here. The cruelty of it all stunned me. I sat on a bench in the airport for what must have been an hour. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt completely hollow, like something inside me had just shut off. He'd even brought up the money he left back home, like I was an inconvenience he was paying to be rid of. It made me feel sick. Eventually, the fog lifted just enough for one thought to cut through: I have to get out of Bali. There was no way I could stay here, knowing he was somewhere nearby, playing house with her. I went to the airline counter where we'd booked our original tickets. I told the woman at the desk that my travel partner had an urgent family emergency and had to leave Bali suddenly, and that I needed to get back home as soon as possible too. She was surprisingly kind. She helped me find a flight that left that evening. It had a layover in Singapore, but it would get me back home by the next afternoon. The change was expensive. I used my emergency travel credit card, and it nearly maxed it out. I had about 6 hours to kill before the flight, but I couldn't stand the idea of sitting around the airport. I rented a small day room at a hotel near the terminal. I sat on the edge of the bed and called my younger sister, Megan. It was the middle of the night where she was, but she answered after 3 rings, her voice thick with sleep and concern. I told her what happened, just the facts. Daniel left. He's with Isabel. I'm at the airport. I'm coming home. I didn't have the energy for emotion, but Megan had enough for both of us. She exploded. Started cursing him out, said she always had a weird feeling about him. She even offered to get on the next flight to Bali and come be with me. I told her not to. There was no point. I just needed her to be there when I landed. I couldn't stay on the phone long, it felt like my body was about to break open from the pressure of holding everything in. The flight home was agonizing. Hour after hour of sitting alone with nothing but that message in my head, repeating itself over and over. I couldn't eat. The smell of the airplane food turned my stomach. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring out the window, barely blinking. When we finally landed, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. My body was drained, like the sadness had reached all the way down to my bones. Megan was waiting right outside customs. As soon as she saw me, she pulled me into a hug, and that's when it all came out, just a few loud, painful sobs. That was the first time I cried. She took me to her apartment. I couldn't even bring myself to think about going back to the house. That place felt poisoned, and I knew Daniel probably expected me to show up, find the envelope full of his pity money, and quietly disappear. The thought of that envelope made me want to throw up. I stayed with Megan for 3 days. She was incredible. She let me talk when I needed to, let me be silent when I couldn't form words. She made me eat even when I didn't want to. She screened my calls, too. Daniel's family kept calling, probably confused because he hadn't told them the truth. On the second day, I called a lawyer. Megan had a friend who'd gone through a nasty divorce and recommended someone solid. I met with the lawyer the next day. I told her everything, the trip, the text, the abandonment. I showed her Daniel's message. She read it carefully, then looked me straight in the eye and told me that I had a clear case, abandonment and infidelity. She said I shouldn't wait around for Daniel's lawyer to make the first move. That text alone was strong evidence. The next morning, Megan came with me back to the house. We chose a time when Daniel would most likely be at work, assuming he'd even come back from Bali when he was supposed to. Later we found out he and Isabel had extended their vacation. His car wasn't in the driveway. The house felt different, empty, cold. Like it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked straight to our bedroom and opened the top dresser drawer. There it was. An envelope with cash. Just like he'd said. It felt disgusting, like a slap in the face wrapped in paper. I grabbed it. My lawyer had told me to gather anything related to finances, so I handed the cash over later to be counted as part of the marital assets. Then I packed everything that was mine, things I'd owned before the marriage, and personal gifts. Megan helped me haul boxes and suitcases to her car. We filled it completely. Before I left, I took photos of every room, every piece of furniture, just like the lawyer advised. I needed to document the condition of the house in case things got messy later. After that, I went to the bank and opened a new account under just my name. I transferred exactly half of the money from our joint accounts, both savings and checking, into it. The lawyer had told me this was fair and legal under the circumstances. I left copies of the withdrawal receipts on the kitchen counter, right where he'd see them if he ever came back. It's been 3 months since that day at Denpasar Airport. I've never gone back to that house. With Megan's support and some help from my parents to cover the deposit and first month's rent, I found a small 2-bedroom apartment across the city. The day after I moved my essentials out of the marital home, my lawyer officially served Daniel with divorce papers. We filed on the grounds of adultery and desertion. That text message? It was Exhibit A. Daniel didn't reach out to me directly once he was served, not right away. I peeked at his social media a couple of times, mostly out of some twisted curiosity. And yep, there he was, smiling ear to ear with Isabel. Photos of them all over Bali, then back home at fancy restaurants, on little weekend getaways. His captions were nauseating. Finally found my true happiness. Living my best life with my amazing woman. He was served the divorce papers at his office. Then his lawyer contacted mine. And that's where the next round of drama began. Daniel's lawyer tried to claim I had deserted him, said I left the marital home and emptied half our joint accounts. But my lawyer shut that nonsense down fast. She pointed straight to the timestamp on Daniel's text, the one where he admitted to being with another woman and literally told me not to contact him. The desertion argument didn't hold water. His own words made my case rock solid. Then, about 2 weeks ago, things took a strange turn. Suddenly, Daniel's legal team started shifting their tone. His lawyer began asking if there was any possibility of mediation, or if I might be open to having a conversation with Daniel. Supposedly, he was devastated and full of regret. It was a complete reversal from the bold, smug attitude he'd been flaunting when he ran off with Isabel. At first, I couldn't figure out what was going on. After all those photos of him and Isabel living it up, all the captions about finding true happiness, this didn't make sense. Then it got weirder. Last week, Daniel started reaching out to me personally. It began with phone calls. A lot of them. First from his regular number. Then from blocked numbers when I stopped picking up. I didn't answer. But he left voicemails, long ones. Sometimes 3 or 4 in a row. He sounded frantic. Next came the emails. Pages of rambling, emotional monologues. And then, he actually showed up at Megan's apartment building one evening and started buzzing her intercom, asking to speak to me. Megan told him I wasn't there and warned him to leave before she called security. He stuck around and argued for a bit, but eventually left. Megan was shaken, but also furious. She called the police and gave them his new address. He'd moved into a rental after being served divorce papers. They paid him a visit and gave him a formal warning about harassment. All his messages followed the same sad pattern. Isabel had dumped him. Turns out that fairy tale didn't last long. According to his voicemails and emails, Isabel told him she was never serious about building anything real. She just wanted a fun vacation, enjoyed the luxury gifts, and when she got bored, she went back to her ex. Daniel said she called him clingy. Said he was too intense. Too needy. At one point, she even told him he was pathetic. And now, he's saying he made the biggest mistake of his life. That he always loved me. That I'm the only one he ever really cared about. He's claiming Isabel took advantage of his midlife crisis, his exact words, and that she manipulated him when he was vulnerable. He's been begging me to stop the divorce. He says he'll do anything I want, go to therapy, couples counseling, quit his job, sell his golf clubs, whatever it takes. He sounds completely desperate. His messages jump between pitiful begging and flashes of anger when I don't respond. He's called me cold, heartless. One voicemail in particular chilled me. He said he didn't know what he might do to himself if I wouldn't speak to him. Claimed his life had no meaning anymore. This was new territory. He'd gotten angry before, broken stuff, snapped at me, but he'd never talked about hurting himself. My lawyer has been very clear, keep moving forward with the divorce, don't respond, and if he keeps this up, we'll get a restraining order. Megan thinks he's a coward who got dumped and now wants his old life back because it was easy. She doesn't believe he loves me. She says he just can't stand being alone and facing the disaster he created. And I agree. There's zero chance I'd ever reconcile with him. That's not even on the table. I'm not sharing this to ask if I should give him another shot. That door isn't just closed, it's locked, bolted, and buried under concrete. What I am asking is how to handle his behavior now. Because he's not stopping. He's begun showing up in the parking lot at my office. Just sits there in his car. He hasn't approached me. Not yet. But I see him parked there when I'm leaving work, and it's making my skin crawl. My lawyer thinks a restraining order is the best legal option, and honestly, I'm leaning that way too. But part of me worries that he really is spiraling. As much as I hate what he did to me, I don't want him to hurt himself. And I definitely don't want this dragging out longer or creating more chaos in my life. I need him to stop, without giving him any hope that I might take him back, and without pushing him to do something reckless. But how? Update 1. First off, thank you to everyone who read my story and took the time to comment. I went through every reply, and it helped more than I expected. Knowing other people have gone through similar things made me feel less isolated. A lot of your advice was blunt and exactly what I needed to hear. Just a few clarifications, since several people had questions. 1. The restraining order. Yes, a lot of you suggested getting one immediately. What you didn't know is that my lawyer and I had already been preparing the paperwork. Seeing him parked outside my work was the final straw. We filed right after I made that original post, and a judge approved it last week. So it's done. Legally, he now has to stay away from me, my apartment, and my workplace. He's also barred from contacting me directly or indirectly. The only communication allowed is through his lawyer to mine. 2. Has he acted like this before? Some of you asked if this unstable behavior is new. And yeah, it kind of is. Like I mentioned in the first part, Daniel always had a bit of a temper. If things didn't go his way, he could sulk or lash out. Breaking the plate, punching a hole in the wall, that kind of thing. He also had a manipulative side, especially with guilt trips. If I didn't agree with something, he'd make me feel like I was the problem. But the abandonment in Bali? That was on another level. And this recent talk of not being able to live without me that only started after Isabel dumped him. He never acted like this when he felt in control. The second he lost that control, and realized he might actually have to face the consequences, that's when he started unraveling. 3. About Isabel. Honestly, I don't know much more about her. And I don't care to. Daniel said she used him and went back to her ex. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Doesn't really matter. In a twisted way, I guess she did me a favor. If nothing else, she peeled the mask off Daniel completely, showed me exactly who he really was. 4. The cash in the dresser. Yes, I gave all of it to my lawyer. She officially logged it as part of our marital assets. I didn't want to touch a cent of it, it felt gross. Like hush money. After reading your comments, and having more talks with Megan and my lawyer, one thing became clear: responding to Daniel in any way would be a mistake. So many of you pointed out that even a single reply, even if it's to tell him to leave me alone, could give him false hope or let him twist things in his mind. And you're right. So I've stayed silent. I knew if I gave Daniel even the slightest response, even just a maybe, he'd twist it into a reason to keep pushing. He'd take it as a sign that there was still a chance. His behavior wasn't really about love or remorse. It was about control. About his world falling apart and trying to pull me back into it. The truth is, he wasn't sorry for what he did to me. He was sorry his plan with Isabel blew up in his face. He was sorry he ended up alone. The threats about self-harm? I could see them for what they were: manipulation. He wanted me to react. He wanted me to feel responsible for his pain again. But I wasn't going to fall for it. The fact that all this desperation only kicked in after Isabel dumped him made it crystal clear: this wasn't about missing me. It was about losing control. So I stuck with the plan: no contact. Let the lawyers handle everything. Total silence from my side. I didn't respond to a single text, call, or email. I blocked every new number he tried to use, every burner email address. It felt like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, but I got good at it. And that was all before the restraining order. Once that was approved, we had a professional process server deliver the paperwork right to his apartment. Legally, he now knew he had to stay away from me completely. No direct or indirect contact, period. Leading up to the order, I kept detailed records of everything. Every call, every voicemail, no matter how disturbing. I saved screenshots of texts and emails. I even snapped photos from my office window when I saw him parked in his car, waiting. I noted the date and time each time it happened. My lawyer had copies of all of it. That evidence is what helped us get the restraining order granted so fast. Daniel didn't take it well. He couldn't contact me directly anymore, that would be a clear legal violation, but that didn't stop him from trying. The night he was served, my call blocker logged more than 20 attempts from his number. Every one of them went straight to silence. Then came a long, nasty email, not to me, but to my lawyer. Which, by the way, still broke the no-contact clause of the restraining order. She's taking legal action on that too. In the email, he called me everything you can imagine: cruel, cold, vindictive. Claimed I was destroying his life. Said he was falling apart and that the restraining order was the final blow. He ranted about how shocked he was that I would do this to him, as if he hadn't thrown everything away in the first place. He even had the nerve to say I was the manipulative one. That I used his moment of weakness, his threats of self-harm, against him to get legal protection. The next day, he wasn't in the parking lot at my work. And that alone brought some peace. Later that afternoon, his lawyer called mine, and from what I was told, he sounded done. Apparently, Daniel had a full-on meltdown in his office. Yelling, pacing, freaking out over how his life was over. He made vague threats about ending it all and then stormed out. A few hours after that, Daniel's sister called both lawyers, his and mine, in a panic. She was hysterical. Daniel had called her, told her he'd taken a bottle of pills, said he couldn't do this anymore, and then hung up. That, of course, set off a chain reaction. She called 911. Paramedics and police went straight to Daniel's apartment. Turned out it was all theatrics. He hadn't actually taken pills. The paramedics found an empty aspirin bottle tipped over on the coffee table, but no real evidence of an overdose. According to the official report, which his lawyer eventually shared with mine, probably hoping it would make Daniel look fragile and pitiful, he was heavily drunk and emotionally unstable, but medically fine. Because he had made statements about harming himself, they took him in for a standard psychiatric evaluation. He spent the night at the hospital and was released the next morning. When my lawyer told me all of this, she was calm and matter-of-fact. She reminded me, Daniel's actions are on him. No matter how dramatic or disturbing, I'm not responsible for what he does. She also told me this whole stunt would actually help reinforce our case, further proof that the restraining order was absolutely necessary. So that's where things stood. He stopped trying to reach me directly after all that. And the divorce? It kept moving forward. His behavior added so much stress to an already painful situation, but none of it changed my decision. I was done. Update 2. It's been about 9 months now since Daniel abandoned me in Bali. 6 months since I wrote my last update. And 3 months since the divorce was finalized. It's official, I am no longer Daniel's wife. The restraining order is still in place, and thankfully, he's been sticking to it at least when it comes to direct contact and showing up in person. The indirect stuff? Like emailing my lawyer? That stopped after she sent a brutal letter to his legal team, making it crystal clear he'd be facing serious legal trouble if he tried it again. Getting the divorce finalized wasn't exactly smooth sailing, though. Daniel, working through his lawyer, fought me on everything. He tried to argue for a bigger cut of the proceeds from the sale of the house. Claimed that because he was the primary breadwinner early in our marriage, he deserved more. Which was laughable. Our incomes were pretty even most years. In fact, I was the one earning more the last 2. At one point, he even had the audacity to request spousal support. His lawyer submitted a claim saying Daniel was suffering from severe emotional distress and couldn't focus on work because of the divorce and because Isabel had left him. They actually wanted me to pay him. The judge tossed that claim out almost immediately, especially after my lawyer presented the text message where Daniel called me a second choice, plus all the harassment records and the official documents behind the restraining order. In the end, everything was divided the way the law requires, pretty evenly. The house got sold, which was a huge relief. I wanted nothing more to do with it or the memories it held. I got my fair share of the sale proceeds, which gave me some financial breathing room. From what I've heard, mostly through mutual acquaintances who either forget I don't want updates or assume I secretly still care, Daniel's life hasn't improved. After Isabel dumped him, he tried dating again. But nothing stuck. People say he's bitter, constantly whining about how unfair the divorce was, how Isabel used him, and how he's just a poor guy who got hurt by 2 women. There were also whispers about him drinking too much after that whole aspirin stunt and his hospital stay. But I haven't seen anything firsthand. And I don't plan to. I don't care anymore. To everyone who followed my story here, thank you. Sharing all of this helped me make sense of the chaos. It gave me clarity. You helped me feel heard when I was falling apart. I don't expect to post any more updates. The legal ties are cut. The restraining order is still active. And I have absolutely no intention of ever letting Daniel back into my life in any form. I'm free. And I'm finally starting to feel like myself again.